Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live, presented by The Grid, right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. As always, I am Bryson Carver. Happy New Year. Happy first show of 2023, and it is a jam-packed one full of absolutely nothing but football. NFL, we had an incredible college football playoff semifinal weekend on Saturday, New Year's Eve, including the very last play. It wasn't technically the last play. There was a kneel down at the end, but the missed kick by the Ohio State kicker came right as the new year rang in, which meant that for some, it was their new year could not have started any better, and for others, it meant their year could not have gotten off to a worse start. So sorry for Ohio State fans. Props to the Georgia Bulldogs fans. I'll get into that later in the show, why TCU won, why Georgia won, as well as later in the show, also discussing the Pittsburgh Steelers still alive, but the bigger story to me from that game is, Lamar Jackson is making himself a lot of bread. He has not played in, 4 or 5 weeks? I'll talk about that later in the show as well. I'll predict Bengals, Bills at the end of today's show. Maybe the game of the season, certainly the most consequential in terms of playoff seeding. I'll also discuss the Tampa Bay Buccaneers clinching the NFC South. And Tom Brady, I think it's safe to say, at age 45, playing it without a shadow of a doubt. His best game of the season for the Bucs offense, their best game of the season. I'll discuss that later in the show. But first, I got to start with the Green Bay Packers mollywopping the Minnesota Vikings by a final score of 41-17. They were aided by a kick return for a touchdown by that Nixon kid, who is such a threat on special teams. I don't know how many kick return touchdowns he has this season, but safe to say, no disrespect to Aaron Rodgers, but he's been quite the upgrade over him in that department. They got a pick six off of Kirk Cousins, who had a dreadful game. I think he had a QBR of 10. Justin Jefferson was held to a catch after, listen, I got to give props where it's due. Jair Alexander all throughout the week was, bumping them gums, as they say, talk about, his 9-catch, 183-yard outburst in week 1 was a fluke. It's not going to happen again. And Mr. Alexander put the clamps on that man. 1 catch on 5 targets. And Jair Alexander, he was wearing that ridiculous big hat. I got to admit to that Robinson guy in Washington, that was not a good trend you started. Okay, let's not do that. It's a terrible trend. There are terrible trends that we have every year. Could we discontinue that one, please, in 2023? But the bigger story from this to me is, really, it's a question. I'll get to the Vikings a little later, but I really want to focus on the Packers. Are they a Super Bowl contender at this point? Because now they were dead in the water at 4-8. Obviously, I wrote them off because I didn't think they made the playoffs before the season. Everybody wrote them off. Now, all of a sudden, they are in control of their own destiny. This next Sunday night, because the NFL just announced their Week 18 schedule, so Packers get the Sunday night game against Detroit. That's a playoff game for Green Bay. They win, and they're in the postseason. It's as simple as that. And so, given this possibly 5-game winning streak, the question is whether or not that they can make any type of run in the playoffs. Well, listen, the defense is dominating right now. I actually have my sister just walked the room. See, she's trying to put pressure on me, but I'm not moving 1 inch. No, they're not a Super Bowl contender. First of all, should they match up say Dallas ends up getting the 2 seed? There's a ton of stuff that could happen for Dallas to get the 2 seed if they win the NFC East, which, given Philly's loss, doesn't seem so unlikely. But they match up against Dallas. They beat Dallas, okay? Because Aaron Rodgers is the co-owner of the Dallas Cowboys and is the owner of the Chicago Bears, as I've said religiously on this show. But they face that Niners squad. Oh, my goodness. That game will be over at halftime. Way Brock Purdy's playing, I get the Niners defense didn't show up against the Las Vegas Raiders, but when you consider, and they played all year up to this point, rushing the quarterback, turning the ball over, and I'm going to actually give Aaron his props in just a second, but when we talk about Aaron Rodgers has led the Packers this 4-game winning streak, folks, that couldn't be further from the truth. In this 4-game winning streak, he has had QBRs of 51, which was his best QBR against the team he owns, the Chicago Bears, a 38 QBR against the beat-up Rams, a 31 QBR versus an average Dolphins defense, and then yesterday a 42 QBR against the worst pass defense in the National Football League, the Minnesota Vikings. But to Aaron Rodgers' credit, and listen, I've been hard on this guy all season long. I've seen a change in tone from him in the last month or so. Seems very optimistic. You see that interview with him with Tracy Wolfson of CBS after the game was very upbeat, which, listen, it's a win. They won a big game, kept their season alive, and now they control their own destiny. We get all that. But there seems to be a vibrance and an optimism about him that we didn't see even the last 2 years when he was the back-to-back league MVP. Take a listen to Aaron Rodgers after the game talking about the Packers' playoff chances.
I do believe in the power of manifestation, and I do believe in momentum. And I believe strongly in the force of the mind. And when you start to believe something strongly, that some miraculous things can happen.
Well, he's not wrong. He's getting very philosophical there. I think we've grown accustomed to Aaron Rodgers being like that from time to time. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is this Packers defense is playing exactly like we thought they would coming into the season. They got in that really, they had that 5-game losing streak. Then they beat Dallas. Then they got in a 3-game losing streak. But what I'm looking at for Green Bay is this. The Packers are what people think the Cowboys are, which is you want your quarterback to be a complementary piece. And Lord have mercy, if Aaron Rodgers is your complementary piece, you are in good shape, ladies and gentlemen. But an excellent defense. Packers are playing much better defensively than the Cowboys are. Played better yesterday than the Niners defense did against Jarrett Stidham, right? You rely on your backfield. You've got one of the best offensive lines in football. David Bakhtiari back from injury. Rely on the two-headed monster. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. It's what they got away from in the playoff loss last year to the Niners. It's what's gotten the most of their wins this year, and it's what they've relied on to this point this season. You look at the Packers' rushing numbers in this 4-game winning streak. $175 against the Chicago Bears. 138 against the Rams. Only at 79 against the Dolphins, but got out of that game because Tua turned the ball over numerous times. And then they had 163 yesterday against Minnesota. Being able to take the ball away, get stops, be great in the red zone. And listen, have Aaron Rodgers in a position where he doesn't necessarily have to carry you. I mean, that's part of the reason the Packers have lost so often in the postseason is, A, they've gotten away from their two-headed monster in the backfield. And, for years outside of Devontae Adams, man, it was a pretty bare cupboard. Now, it still is. Christian Watson's their number one guy. I don't think he is a number one at this point in his career, but he's certainly ascending. He's a solid route runner. He's got speed. But being able to improve in terms of getting the chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, I know he's dealing with the hip injury yesterday. Allen Lazard, I'm still not high on him at all. I feel like he's more of a 3 on a good team. I think if you think about guys, Romeo Doubs has been pretty ineffective this season, had a solid game against Buffalo. If the Packers want to go anywhere in the postseason, and again, they match up against the Niners, then they're going home in round 1. They'll be like a Duke and Kentucky freshman. They'll be in the postseason. They'll be out the postseason in a 7-day span. If they are going to go on any run whatsoever, rely on the defense, which has been outstanding. Rely on the two-headed monster in the backfield. And if you're in a position where Aaron Rodgers, has to win the game for you, not that many quarterbacks you want to have in that position than a 4-time league MVP. Now, on the contrary, Aaron Rodgers has historically been one of the biggest underachievers in the postseason, considering all the MVPs. And we obviously got that Super Bowl against Pittsburgh long, long ago and back in 2010. Since it's been, a lot of home losses at Lambeau, a lot of blown leads. But when I'm looking at for the Packers, are they a Super Bowl contender? No. Are they going to get in the postseason? I don't think there's any question about it. With all due respect to the Detroit Lions, who've had a remarkable season given the expectations we have for them coming in, I don't think there's a shadow of a doubt. At Lambeau, in the cold, primetime game, listen, if the Packers blow this one, this would be a pretty devastating loss. As for Minnesota, I think I'm pretty much right on the money on the Vikings this season from what I had predicted for them coming into this year. They'd win the division easily, which they have, and they would win a playoff game, which if the playoffs started today, they face the New York Giants. Now, that's certainly a winnable game for the Giants. We saw Daniel Jones played yesterday. How about Daniel Jones? I mean, look, albeit against the Colts, it's the Jeff Saturday-led Colts. I understand that. But Daniel Jones played outstanding yesterday. He had a QBR of like 97 or 8. It was something crazy. It has to be the highest in the NFL this season. But the point being, they can beat the Giants at home. That said, if they match up in the divisional round against Philadelphia, a San Francisco, a Dallas, they're not winning that game. The Minnesota Vikings this season, they're 12-4. They clinched the NFC North 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, in that big comeback over Indianapolis. They have a point differential minus 19. Think about that. A 12-win Vikings team has a point differential minus 19. The Raiders, Browns, Saints, and Jets have a higher point differential this year than the Minnesota Vikings. For the record, all 4 of those teams have losing records. So I never bought into this team as a Super Bowl contender. I have defended Kirk Cousins a lot this season. I think, listen, we give him a hard time about the playoff record and the Monday Night Football record. I understand that. But is he a guy that I consider at least pushing to be top 10 in today's current NFL? You can make a case. I don't think he is. I think he's around 11 or 12. But you can win a lot of games this league with Kirk Cousins. The problem with Kirk Cousins is because he's not an elite quarterback, you're going to have games like yesterday against a great Packers defense in the cold. By the way, Kirk Cousins has historically been really good against the Packers. Did not show itself yesterday afternoon. But a great win for the Packers. They're in control of their own destiny. I wrote them off for dead. But hey, I was wrong on this one. And the real irony about it is I had the Packers going 9-8 this season and missing the playoffs. Well, in order for the Packers to make the playoffs, they got to win Sunday, which would make them 9-8. So I'd be like half right, half wrong. But that's the fun of predicting things before the season. Got a few comments here from Patrick Brown, the host of the Chaotic Sports Podcast here on the Grid. He says Jair Alexander backed it up with his play as well. No question about it. He was outstanding. He also says Green Bay's been in the scenario before via 2010. Credit where it's due for turning it around after we all said they were done. And he says Kirk Cousins in primetime games, very little to the imagination. This is what we've known for several seasons. When it's time to win big primetime games, he fails to deliver. And it also cost the Vikings, by the way, a shot at possibly getting that number 1 seed. Because now they're at 4 losses, and they'd have to have a whole lot of things. Actually, no, they can't get the number 1 seed now because they got 4 losses. If Philly loses, they'll have 4 losses, but Philly would have the tiebreaker, so they can't get the number 1 seed now. So yeah, that's a pretty devastating loss, playoff seeding-wise for the Vikings, but they are kind of what I thought they were, which is a double-digit win team, upgrading at coach who would get the most out of his offensive personnel. I didn't think the defense would be this bad. I didn't think it'd be among the worst pass defenses in football. I didn't think, I get it, he's a veteran at this stage of his career, but I didn't think Patrick Peterson would be a liability. But at least the Vikings know now. We took a big step from last year, 2021, in which we were awful in one-score games. This year, we're amazing in one-score games. But we have got to improve on the defensive side of the ball. There's no question about it. But a great win for the Packers. No question about it. You know, considering being 4-8, they lost to Philadelphia, I think it was, on that Sunday night game when Jordan Love came in. I came on the show, said it was great for Green Bay because now we get to see what the kid has. Now, I still think it could end up coming back to back. It could end up backfiring if they go out in round 1 or round 2 and you don't know what you have in the kid. But listen, they made their bed. It's working out for them thus far, but I do not see them as a team that gets out of round 2. Face Dallas in round 1, they'll beat them because Aaron Rodgers owns the Cowboys. I have resigned to that fact. I'm not, there's just, sometimes there are just athletes who own other organizations. It's as simple as that. LeBron James with the Toronto Raptors, right? You are never, ever, ever, ever going to pick the Toronto Raptors in a playoff series, say LeBron ever went back to the Eastern Conference, to beat LeBron. I don't care who LeBron's got. I don't care if Toronto's got Michael Jordan. They went back in a time machine and got 1988 Michael Jordan. It doesn't matter. They're not beating LeBron. They're not. It just happens in sports. But if they face the Niners, they're not beating San Francisco. We've seen that movie before. Last time they faced the Niners faced the Packers in Santa Clara. That game was over at halftime. What was it? 28-0. Yeah, let's not be ridiculous about this. But speaking of number 12s today, you know, I said, I guess it was a couple months ago now. I'm all over the place with the schedule now that we're in 2023. But I said a couple months ago, after a Thursday night loss to the Baltimore Ravens, that we were officially seeing the decline of Tom Brady. I did not say we were seeing the end of Tom Brady. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a virtuoso. Albeit, it's a 6-win Carolina Panthers. Albeit, the fact that the Buccaneers just needed to get to 500, essentially, to win the NFC South, the worst division in football, I understand. But this is why I say, if you are a fan of the Cowboys or the Eagles, you don't want any part of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Matter of fact, I will go so far as to say on this show, second place in the NFC is one and done in the playoffs. I can say that with full confidence. Carolina's got a great defense. Brian Burns, the secondary, they just added Josh Norman, who played pretty well. They've been great. Tampa Bay's offense has essentially done nothing for 3 months. 4 months, actually. And yet Tom Brady, when his team absolutely had to have him play at his best, 34 for 45, 432 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, a QBR of 77, which felt a bit low to me, and a passer rating of 127. I said when I was predicting this game on Friday's show, if Carolina wins, it will be because they blew Tampa out. Because you don't win close games against this guy. You don't win close games. Gotta have it. Do or die games against this guy. Rams had him dead to rights. Rams were up 7 over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in week 9. Tampa came back and won on a game-winning drive. The Saints were up 13 with 3 minutes left against Tampa back in week 13. Tampa came back and won off a Tom Brady game-winning drive. The Bucs were embarrassingly, on Christmas Day, down 10 to the Trace McSorley-led Cardinals. Albeit, it's the Cardinals. But they came back and won the game on a Tom Brady game-winning drive. Yesterday, down 11 in the fourth quarter. Came back and won the game on the Tom Brady game-winning drive. Tom and Mike Evans have found their connection once again. Mike Evans had not caught a touchdown pass since week 4 against the Kansas City Chiefs, which is, by the way, the last time the Buccaneers put up 30 points. If those two have their rapport back, now some of it, listen, in fairness, some of it was for some weird reason I don't really understand. I think Steve Wilkes has done a really good job as the interim head coach, but to continue to play one-on-one press man against Mike Evans makes no sense. Okay, I don't get it. You got to give him some cushion because he's going to run by you. Mike Evans is still one of the fastest guys in the league at his size, and we all know his catch radius is massive because of his length. He's still, I think, one of the 10 best receivers in the National Football League at his best. I still believe that. And by the way, that's now 9, as my man Grady Edwards pointed out to me, he texted me last night, that's now 9 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons for Mike Evans. Like, Duke can play. Chris Godwin was good yesterday. Like, made some big catches on third down. Cade Otton made some plays. I'm sorry. You want to face Tampa? You want to face with that defense? The way it buckled down late in the fourth quarter, the way it can it can get turnovers and get to the quarterback. That Trayon Shayanka, I think is how you say his name, can really get to the quarterback around the right side of the offensive line. Now, the only drawback to Tampa is this. They cannot run the football. They can't run the ball whatsoever. Okay, Rachaad White, I think, is the better option at running back right now. He seems to show more burst. He hits the holes quicker than Leonard Fournette can at this stage. But, I mean, they have 67 yards rushing on 2.7 yards a carry. Tampa can't run the ball. And so the downside of that is you're going to have Tom Brady kind of carry you offensively. But when you have a defense that is playing as well as Tampa's has this season, you can do that. I mean, they weren't known for necessarily running it down your throat in the Super Bowl run, were they? Leonard Fournette was good in the red zone, but they weren't a team that would just smash mouth football all the way down 75-yard drive to the house. That wasn't really their game. But I've watched this movie a time or two. I have. You have too, I'm sure. Tom Brady in the playoffs. Written off. People saying he's done, too old. I've seen this movie before, folks. I'm telling you, be careful. Be very, very careful. It's like that guy in the horror, like Michael Myers almost, but it's like that guy in the horror movie that you just can't kill. You can't get rid of him. You're constantly having to worry about him. That's Tom Brady. If you want to beat Tampa Bay in the playoffs, you got to blow them out. You got to hit them with the early run quick. Hold on to that because I've seen it. Think about what happened with the Rams last year. Tampa couldn't run the ball. Look at this year. Couldn't run the ball. Tampa's defense couldn't get stops. They couldn't stop the run. They got beat by numerous deep balls down the field to Cooper Kupp and all those guys, Odell. Tom was getting pressure. We know Tom Brady is one of the worst quarterbacks in the history of the league when pressured. But what started to happen? Tampa Bay got a nice little drive, got a field goal, made it a 21-point game. Then they got a fumble, and they made it a 2-score game. And all of a sudden, some really weird things started happening to the Rams. They had a snap went over Stafford's head. You had a field goal that was short from like 45 yards out. It didn't miss. It was short. You had a Cam Akers fumble with 2 minutes left where Tampa got the ball back and then tied the game. It's not just on the field, folks. It's psychologically. I don't think I've seen anything like it in sports where when you see that guy getting close, you're like, uh-oh, he's going to do it to us. And credit to the Rams, by the way, in that last drive, Stafford and Cooper Kupp essentially won that game at the end, and Matt Gay hit the walk-off field goal. But still, you don't want to face this dude. If you play Tampa in the playoffs, it's going to be Dallas or Philadelphia in round 1. Blow them out. You got to go up 3-4 scores, and you got to be up comfortably going the fourth quarter. Because if it's a 2-score game, you're done. You're losing the game. I don't care. I don't care if it's Dak Prescott. That's my guy. I don't care if it's Jalen Hurts. You're not beating that guy. I've seen this too many times in New England, in Tampa. This guy has a psychological edge over every single team he plays in the playoffs because he's seen everything. There's nothing in the postseason that Tom Brady has not seen or done. Everybody else, I don't know. And when you know who number 12 is on the other side, you don't think about the fact that he's 45 or in his 23rd season. That doesn't cross your mind. You just think of Tom Brady. You just think of, shoot, this dude does this in his sleep. This dude comes back in playoff games that he shouldn't win in his sleep. We just need, and then coaches as well. It's not just players, by the way, it's coaches. They start getting conservative. They're just trying to keep the ball out of Tom's hands. They stop being aggressive. You saw that with the Saints at times in that big comeback win for Tampa. Listen, I know Todd Bowles hasn't been what we thought he'd be at head coach. They can't really run the ball. Man. Cowboys and Eagles, I'm sure, were hoping for a Carolina Panthers win yesterday. They didn't get it. It's Tom Brady. It's what he does. I'm just warning you in advance. And I'm not just talking about, by the way, not just Dallas and Philly. So they're the 4 seed. Tampa's locked in as the 4 seed now because they clinched the NFC South. They win. If they beat the 5 seed, just whoever that may be, they would then go to, in all likelihood, the 1 seed, unless the Giants or the Packers, who are all likelihood to be the 7 seed, unless they pull an upset. But all likelihood, they go to the 1 seed. Now, if it's San Francisco, that's the only team. But even San Francisco, loaded roster. But we saw they can be occasionally had on the defensive side. Okay? I mean, Brock Purdy will put the ball in harm's way. There was a couple of passes yesterday, and I'm a man starting Brock Purdy, but there's a couple throws yesterday where you're like, oh, shoot, that should have been intercepted. Like, oh, he got lucky. If only Dak Prescott could get Brock Purdy's luck on the interception department, right? I'm warning you in advance. It's going to happen. Philly, for their sake, better win on Sunday against the Giants. Dallas, for their sake, better beat Washington and cross their fingers for an Eagles loss. Because if they don't, that guy's going to come in and kill your season in your season. I'm just telling you. Mike Bumps is in the comments. He says, is Cole Beasley playing? I think Schefter said he's been activated. Not sure how much of a factor that he's going to be. I mean, he's Cole Beasley. He's not like a world beater, to say the very least. But yes, I do think Cole Beasley is playing, Mike Bumps. Patrick Brown, TB12's best game of 2023. Carolina had a 21-10 lead and couldn't close it. Only the second game they've scored 20-plus points. Yep. Well, no, it's the first time they've scored 30 since week 4. I think they've scored 20 a couple of times. I know they had 20 against Seattle in Germany, in Munich, which was, again, just a great environment. Who else did they score 20 on? They had 23 against Cincinnati. They had 22 against the Ravens. But, yeah, offense has been hard to come by for those guys this season, to say the least. So to see that yesterday, if you're a Bucs fan, that should give you a good reason to celebrate. Patrick Brown says, not to mention Tom Brady has yet to have a losing season in his 23-year career. And that will be on the line Sunday. I guarantee that's why Tom Brady wants to play. Because, again, Tampa's won the South. They're locked in as the 4 seed. The game against Atlanta, for playoff's sake, means absolutely nothing. Atlanta's out. Tampa's in, but they're locked in. There's nothing they can do to affect their playoff positioning. But maybe that's a good point, Patrick. I wonder if that's why Tom wants to play. If nothing else, it could be because he played well and he wants to maintain that rhythm. He wants to maintain that momentum and not have it cooled off by having the week off against the Falcons. Maybe that's what it is. Because Todd Bowles announced today, they're playing their guys. They're playing their starters. So we'll see what happens with the Bucs. So a lot of drama in the NFC, especially with historically, not talking about right now, but historically the two best players, some of the two best players in league history playing that conference. And I'll get to the AFC a little bit later, but I wanted to talk about the college football playoff because I said Michigan by 18. I think I said 38-20. And then I said Georgia would beat Ohio State 45-38. I did see that one being a shootout because, listen, Ohio State got destroyed by Michigan, but similar sort of to TCU. Maybe this is part of the reason TCU won, but Ohio State is too talented of a roster to get destroyed by Michigan, hear for a month about how bad they are, and have nothing to say about it. Like Ohio State, talent gap between them and Georgia isn't crazy. Okay, Ohio State was number 2 all season long for a reason. And so I want to talk about the second game first. I'll get to TCU Michigan in just a second. But I want to talk about the second game first because for Georgia, that was one of those games. The great, I think it was Rudy Tomjanovich said, never underestimate the heart of a champion. And that game was the very definition of situational football for a great team. But both are great teams. I mean, I don't think C.J. Stroud could have possibly played any better than he did on Saturday night. I really don't. I mean, you look at his numbers, just going up and down the field, 23 for 34, 348, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, QBR 0 to 100 of 94. There's nothing else, and put up 41 points on the best defense in college football. To me, there was a couple of things that sort of got that one spiraling out of control for the Buckeyes. The Marvin Harrison Jr. concussion. He got hit in the back of the end zone. It was a really brutal hit. And he's on the sideline. He's begging to go back in, but you could just tell he's out of it. Like, dude had his bell rung times 10. Like, he was, props to Ohio State. It's a do or die game, but props to medical staff for saying, like, dude, you can't go in. Like, you've been concussed. So I think that hurt him because Marvin Harrison Jr. was cooking in the first half. But also, too, to me, the turning point in the game, let me make sure I have this right, because it was in the fourth quarter. Ohio State is up double digits. Make sure. Yes. Yeah, so Ohio State is up 35-34 late in the third quarter, possibly going into the fourth. And Georgia's defense holds them in the red zone to a field goal. Now, if Ohio State scores there, I'm not so sure Georgia wins this football game. And to a guy that, again, I've been critical of him, I still do not believe he's an NFL quarterback. Size, maturity, decision-making at times can leave a lot to be desired. Stetson Bennett was remarkable the fourth quarter the other night. He really was. He 10 for 12, almost 200 yards, couple touchdown passes. especially that last drive, because that first touchdown that made it a 6-point game, Georgia receiver just broke the Ohio State corner's ankles. Like a great route, no safety help over the top, beats him, touchdown, it's a 6-point game. But that last drive, especially that one throw that got them down to the red zone, he was money. Right on the mark, perfect amount of velocity and accuracy to get the ball to the playmakers and put them in position to go win the game, which of course they did. But that was the perfect example of situational football winning out. Because I like Ryan Day. I'm higher on Ryan Day than most people are. I think a lot of Ohio State fans are harder on him than they should be. It's like he's lost, 6 games since he took over as the Buckeyes head coach? If that, I could have that number wrong, but I think it's 6 games. I mean, come on, like those calling to fire Ryan Day, I can't help it. He's been to the playoffs 3 times. He's been to a national championship. He's won a Big Ten championship. Listen, I get the standard Ohio State, just like it is at Alabama, Clemson, all these schools in Georgia, is to win national titles. But just because you don't win the title every season, just to Ohio State fans, I'm not comparing him. I'm not saying he's as good as this particular individual and this coach, but do not do what my Tennessee Volunteers did, self-destructing the program by firing Philip Fulmer because he had one bad year and setting your program back 15 years up until we finally found our guy, Josh Heupel. Don't do that. This is just warning right now. That said, I did not like Ohio State's play calling once they got into field goal range. So Stroud ran for that first down at that big long run of, how long was it? 27 yards to the Georgia 31. Georgia has, Ohio State, has 2 timeouts. There are 19 seconds left in the game. Get closer. Yes, you're in field goal range, but if there's 3 seconds, yeah, obviously you kick the field goal there. Try and make it easier on your kicker. And I'm not sitting here defending the kicker because that was one of the worst missed field goals I've seen in my life, especially with the game on the line. But come on. You got a hot quarterback who's mobile, who's been accurate all night. This isn't some sort of situation where it's a game manager who threw a 5-yard slant and the guy took it 40 yards. No, C.J. Stroud was the best quarterback this weekend. With all due respect to Max Duggan and to Stetson Bennett, C.J. Stroud was the best quarterback this weekend in college football. Ride the hot hand. Get yourself closer. Put yourself in a position where you can win the game on a chip shot. I mean, Georgia scored. How much time was left? Georgia scored with 54 seconds left in the game. They went up 42-41. Okay, you get downfield as quickly as you did in, 35 seconds? Ride the hot hand, get a little close to field goal range. Instead, they ran the ball, used a timeout, and then there's a couple plays where C.J. Stroud was flushed out of the pocket, had to throw the ball out of bounds. The clock is your friend. Timeouts are your friend. Georgia is hoping you do what you do. Georgia's mindset is, once Ohio State gets a field goal range, it's okay, we're going to push them back or make sure they don't get another yard after this. Don't make this field goal any easier. So I didn't love Ryan Day's game management and clock management there at the end for Ohio State. That said, I'm not going to be as hard on him because he's a college kicker. He's barely older than I am. He's a kid. But I talked about this. I remember all the way back in week 1 of this season when LSU's kicker had the game-tying extra point blocked against Florida State. You've got one job. You got one job. While the quarterbacks got to memorize the playbooks, make sure everybody is in position to succeed, make sure the protection's good, receivers are in the right route tree, all of that. The defensive players understanding where to be, when to be there. These, especially the guys up front in the trenches, offensively and defensively, fighting their guts out for 60 hard minutes. And you just have to make a kick. You just got to make a kick. I get you get one shot, but we say all the time, one play can turn a game around. One mistake for those guys can turn the game around. Again, I'm not going to be as brutal on him as I would be on a Justin Tucker or somebody. Excuse me. Although Justin Tucker usually doesn't miss those kicks, but I don't know. I am by nature, I've got a lot of I've got strengths. I've got a lot of weaknesses. I think one of my strengths as a human being is being empathetic, trying to feel, trying to be there for somebody when maybe you don't understand their pain, but you don't deny that their pain is there. But there's one group of people that I can't, for some reason, I just can't have sympathy for, and that's kickers, because they do have one job. That's, again, that kick was no good off his foot. Like, as soon as that ball crossed the line, you're like, oh, he missed it. Like, it wasn't one of those where you're like, oh, it's just so close if it'll just hook back in, or it. No, it wasn't even close. Wasn't even close. Phenomenal game, by the way, all the way around. Patrick Brown says, much as I dislike Ohio State, Ryan Day has done a great job in place of Urban Meyer. Buckeye fans won't accept him like they did Urban and Jim Tressel. I absolutely agree. And part of it was because he did inherit a great roster. He did inherit one of the premier programs in college football, heck, in college sports, when you think about their overall success over the past decade. But he's done his job. I mean, listen, I understand, maybe he's not the most, I guess, lovable personality. He's kind of, I don't know, what's the word to describe me? He's kind of, maybe not necessarily like media savvy or media friendly like guys like Urban were, but he did get Ohio State to the playoff again. I'm just throwing that out there. There's a lot of good teams this year that didn't make the college football playoff. Alabama didn't make it. Clemson didn't make it. Tennessee didn't make it. So almost threw USC in that mix, but they just lost to Tulane. So I can't put them in that group. Man, what a game that was, though. Props to Tulane. 2-10 last year. Then to win the Cotton Bowl this year with an 11-2 record. Hats off. Or 11-2 or 12-2? Let me make sure. 12-2. I'm sorry. I sold them short. This is kind of in college football, before I get to TCU, Michigan, this in college football has kind of been the year of rebirths for certain programs. I mean, you talk about Tulane. They go from 2-12 to 12-2 with a Cotton Bowl win over USC. My Tennessee Volunteers, 2 years ago, we won 3 games, had a bunch of academic recruiting violations. The coach was fired. It was a disaster. We had 30-plus players transfer. We're a mess. 2 years later, 11-2 season, Orange Bowl champions over Clemson. And then TCU, last year, 5-7, come into the season unranked, new head coach Sonny Dykes, and they're a win away from being national champions. Like, that is why we love the sport. And that just goes to show you, ladies and gentlemen, if you get the coach right, it's all that matters. If you get the coach right, a guy who can turn the program around, a guy who can get these kids to buy into what he's selling. Because listen, speaking as a 19-year-old, us 19-year-olds are dumb when it comes to life experience. But one of the strengths, I think, of Gen Z is that we got a lot of weaknesses. Lord knows we got a lot of weaknesses. But one of our strengths, we're good at smelling BS. Like, when it's there, we know it's there. And when you got some of these, sort of gimmicky coaches coming in, they're out on it from the beginning. But when you get guys that are real, like Josh Heupel, Sonny Dykes, the coach for Tulane, they'll buy into it. And you see what the results of that are. So hats off to Tulane, to my Tennessee Volunteers, of course, Orange Bowl champions over Clemson, and to TCU for beating Michigan. I want to talk about that game for just a second, because I know a lot of folks are talking about, well, this is Jim Harbaugh choking another bowl game, right? It's six straight bowl losses for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Certainly not the number you want, especially considering the last 2 years being in the college football playoff. Last year just got destroyed by Georgia. This year you lose in a shootout against TCU in which you never led. Here's my takeaway. Obviously, TCU scored 51. 2 of those came on pick sixes. 2 of those touchdowns, 14 of those 51 points came on pick sixes thrown by Michigan. But I doubted TCU all season long. I did. And I thought it was nutso, not necessarily to have TCU in the playoff. That didn't make me, I was like, oh, this is just a travesty. Like Cincinnati getting the playoff last year. That was ridiculous. Like, stop. Cincinnati was not one of the 4 best teams in college football. Stop. TCU, I didn't think they were, but it didn't ruin my day or anything. Cincinnati, that ruined my day. But I always doubted, okay, like TCU, they're 3rd going into the Big 12 title game. They lose to Kansas State, and yet they stay ranked 3rd. And my argument was, in the regular season, if a TCU is ranked 3rd and lost to, by the way, a very good Kansas State team, although they didn't show it against Alabama, but it is Alabama. But a very good Kansas State team, if TCU is ranked 3rd, lost, you think they would have stayed 3rd. That was sort of my argument. However, what TCU did against Michigan was show that they were a great team, that they were a truly great team. Here's why that is. Because they did something, and you saw Georgia do this at times against Ohio State the other night. What all great teams do. When the other team makes a mistake, you capitalize on it. When the other team gives you an opportunity, you seize it. That's what TCU did. The pick six. I mean, think about that situation. TCU gets an officiating break, right? The deep ball touchdown to Michigan, that was clearly a touchdown. Like, to me, because the official said, well, he secured it. At the time he secured the football, his knee was down short of the end zone. I didn't think he secured the football until he was in the end zone. So to me, the fact that it was a touchdown was a terrible call. That said, though, Michigan runs the ball. What is TCU? They don't hang their heads. They're like, hey, they haven't scored yet. Forced a fumble. And it seemed like early, you heard that Michigan player talking about, is TCU from the Big 12? I think they're from the Big 12, right? And he was dead serious, by the way. And Sonny Dykes and some of the guys were talking about after the game, yeah, they took that personally. And look, it's similar to kind of what I was talking about with Ohio State when I picked them to play Georgia close, is that, look, when you're in the college football playoff, you have been chosen as one of the 4 best teams of sport. You have been given the opportunity to win 2 games to win a national title. When you have to hear for a month, every single day, about how Michigan's going to dominate you, they're going to run the football on you like they've been doing to everybody else all season long. They just destroyed Ohio State. Their defense is going to smother you. You're not going to move the ball. You hear that every single day on these networks, on the radio, you go into practice, social media. You take that personally. And you could see early, especially around that second, third drive of the game, TCU was playing with some energy. They were winning up front against Michigan's offensive line, which even Ohio State couldn't do. I thought Max Duggan played well. Listen, I really like this kid. He's scrappy. He's tough. He makes all the throws. Max Duggan yesterday, 225 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, and a 75 QBR. But again, when the play needs to be made, he makes it. And that's kind of what's listen, the national title game, and we'll talk more about that a week from now when the game is played in SoFi. But Georgia minus 13 feels like a stretch a little bit. Obviously, Georgia should be favored, and gut feeling is they'll win the game. But considering the fact that TCU can take the ball away from you, which Stetson Bennett threw that really bad interception, second quarter against Ohio State, TCU can take advantage of that. Obviously TCU is going to need to get some of their playmakers back from injury. They lost their running back early. Being able to get some of those guys back is going to be key for them. But that is, folks, Brady and Belichick made a living off this for 2 decades. They play teams close, maybe even if they were overmatched, if they had some injuries, certain things didn't go their way going into the game. But if a team gave them an opportunity, a team made a mistake, they always capitalized off it. That's what my Warriors have done for the better part of the last decade during this dynasty. It's what Alabama football's done. It's what the Bulls did in the 90s. It's what the Lakers did in the early 2000s. It's the Spurs in their run when they had 5 championships with Popovich and then with Duncan, Parker, Ginobili. That's what great teams do. Good teams capitalize on about half of those, right? Like they get excited about the fact that they got a break in terms of whether it's a turnover, whether it's an officiating break, and they don't focus on actually winning the game. They're just focused on that play. And they were stretching that game. Like that third quarter, I think there was like 44 points combined in the third quarter. Michigan's offense goes off, but TCU's taking advantage. Like the fact that going into the fourth quarter, the play of the game, I don't think there's a shadow of a doubt about it. It's 3rd down and 7, I think it was. Let me make sure. 3rd down and 7 for TCU about early to mid fourth quarter, right? They're up 41-38 at their own 24-yard line. And Duggan hit Quentin Johnston, who, by the way, in my opinion, should be the first receiver taken in this year's NFL draft. 4.4 speed, catch radius, route running ability, run after the catch. He's got it all. That was the play of the game, the 76-yard touchdown, and TCU never looked back. Great teams take advantage of other teams' mistakes, and that's exactly what TCU did to their credit. Patrick Brown talking about the USC game. He says, I'm sure Barry isn't a happy USC fan right now. I can tell you, Patrick, we texted a couple hours ago. He is not. And I can't say I really blame him. He says, we may have to check on him. 2 losses to Utah and then to lose the Cotton Bowl in the final 4 minutes. Yeah, it's definitely a painful loss if you're a Trojans fan. Patrick also says, credit to TCU. They came out and ready to play. They came out ready to play and didn't look back. Michigan couldn't find any rhythm until the third quarter. In the end, TCU made the plays to win the game. And that's something else too. Like, I was talking about Tom Brady a couple segments ago about if you want to beat Tom Brady, you got to blow him out. If you want to beat a great team, it's hard to come back. Like, that's part of the reason that my Vols were able to beat Alabama. Yeah, which was, by the way, if you didn't check my New Year's Eve special out, you can't do it on YouTube because YouTube took it down for some copyright stuff. I don't know. But you can listen to it on Spotify. But Tennessee beating Alabama was my number 2 moment. But in terms of that game individually, that's part of the reason my Vols won. They got out to like a 28-10 lead or something. I think, it was 28-10 Tennessee, and Bama came back because great teams, got to play a great 60-minute game to beat those teams. And hats off to TCU for doing just that. And I don't see a Georgia runaway on Monday night. I don't. I think we're in for a good one. And it was also refreshing, too, because so many of the semifinal games have just been duds. I mean, the first playoff, you had Ohio State, Alabama that came down to the wire. Probably the best college football playoff semifinal game was the Rose Bowl between Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield, and then Georgia. And Georgia obviously won that game. I think it was 51-48 in overtime on a Sony Michel game-winning touchdown. But that was ever since that. We haven't had that many good playoff games since. I know Ohio State Clemson played a close one a few years back in Arizona, but for the most part, these playoff games between 2 and 3 and 1 and 4 have just been kind of boring. Listen, that is the most entertaining 7 hours of college football that I probably watched in my life. It was great. It was great television. A lot of points, obviously. It lived up to the hype. I would argue in some facets it surpassed the hype. So hats off to all 4 teams playing their hearts out, giving us the fans 2 very exciting games. But a special congratulations to the TCU Horned Frogs and the defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs. And I really think that we're in for a really good one in the national title game a week from tonight, without a shadow of a doubt. I do want to shift back to the NFL for a second, though. What I love about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, anytime they get together, anytime they face off, is they're always low scoring. I mean, it's one of the most predictable things in sports. Like when the Ravens and Steelers meet, if a team reaches 30 points, like take a picture of it and frame it, because it never happens. It's always very physical, great defensive battles. Obviously, we think about back in the day, those great Steelers defenses with Palomalu and those Ravens defenses with Ray Lewis, like back and forth, so many great matchups between those teams, even in the playoffs as well. I think Pittsburgh beat Baltimore in an AFC title game around 2010, I think it was. But last night, you had Steelers-Ravens, and for Pittsburgh, it was essentially an elimination game, because if they lose, their season's over. They're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. And for the Ravens, if they win and they get help with a Bengals loss tonight, then they're at least in the driver's seat of that AFC North. Although, should the Bengals lose tonight to the Bills, then it will all come down to next week. The winner of that game will win the AFC North. I'll start with Pittsburgh before I go to Baltimore. So, Steelers won 16-13 on a game-winning drive led by Kenny Pickett. I liked Kenny Pickett coming out of last year's draft. I was actually higher than Malik Willis, and thus far, listen, Kenny Pickett hasn't necessarily blown anybody's socks off, but he's been significantly better than my guy Malik Willis, who was drafted by the Titans, who is now being benched in favor of my man, who's been my man for much longer, Joshua Dobbs. But for Kenny Pickett, there's sometimes there's quarterbacks that don't necessarily wow you with anything. Their arm doesn't really wow you. Their accuracy is good, not great. They can move. Like Kenny Pickett can move. I think in today's NFL, today's world of football in general, you have to be at least somewhat mobile. Like, if you're a statue staying in the pocket, it's almost impossible to be successful. Like I've always said about Tom Brady, you're never going to mistake him for a guy like Michael Vick, running 50 yards to the house. But not many quarterbacks in the NFL move better in the pocket than Tom Brady. So he's at least got that component. And Kenny Pickett, without question, has that. But there's certain guys, I know it's so cliche when describing quarterbacks. It really is. And I try to stay as far away from it as possible. But he's got the it factor. Like, whatever it is, I think Kenny's got it. Those guys on the sideline, they respond to him in ways that not many teams do with rookie quarterbacks. They love this guy. I mean, my favorite moment of the NFL weekend easily was when Kenny Pickett led that game-winning drive, had that amazing 3rd-and-8 play in the red zone to Najee Harris for what ended up being the game-winning touchdown. And Mike Tomlin, who's, we know at times can be an animated coach, but is very much a defensive guy, right? Defensive coaches kind of have a way about him. And as Kenny Pickett's going to the sideline, Mike Tomlin just looks him dead in the eye and goes, "Kenny effing Pickett." Like, it was one of the best moments of the weekend. It was like, man, that's so cool. But whatever Kenny Pickett has, whatever that it factor is, he's got it. Like, he galvanizes that locker room. They believe in him. And incredibly for the Steelers, they're alive. Mike Tomlin has a chance still to get another non-losing season, which in today's NFL, it now being a 17-game schedule, unless you have a tie in there, you're going to go 8-9 or 9-8, if you're right in the middle there. But not only that, I think Pittsburgh's playoff chances are genuinely realistic because obviously they got to win next week against Cleveland. It's most important thing is for the Steelers to take care of their business to be even in the position to make the playoffs. They beat the Browns next week. They're 9-8, and all they would need, look at the standings right now in the AFC, all the Steelers would need is for the Patriots to lose to the Bills, which, I mean, have you seen Josh Allen's numbers against New England? They're kind of video game-like. And for the Dolphins, who are not going to have Tua, may not have Teddy Bridgewater, so it's going to be Skylar Thompson out there against the Jets. So essentially, if the Steelers win, the Bills win, and the Jets win, the Steelers are in the playoffs. And another stat to look out for, and we talk about most valuable player, which, I think it's Patrick Mahomes, although I think I'll talk a little bit about the Eagles later in the show. I think for those that doubt Jalen Hurts, are we questioning how valuable he is now? I'll sort of get into that a little later. But how many defensive guys are as valuable to their team as TJ Watt is to the Pittsburgh Steelers? Obviously, he won Defensive Player of the Year last year. He tied Michael Strahan's sack record for a single season. But in terms of energy, obviously he gets the quarterback and he's great stopping the run. But the Steelers this season are 7-2 when TJ Watt plays. I mean, and by the way, he can get his hands on the football, possibly get interceptions here and there. He did in week 1 in the game he got hurt against Joe Burrow. I'm telling you, if Pittsburgh gets in the playoffs, I'm not picking them to make some kind of crazy run or anything because I just don't think they have the personnel offensively to do so because I think their offensive line is not very good. And as much as I like Kenny Pickett, I don't think he's Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow took a horrible offensive line last year to the Super Bowl. But the 2 seed could be one of the 3. Bengals, who the Steelers have beat, Chiefs, obviously we know Arrowhead's a tough place to win, or the Bills, who the Bills smoked the Steelers earlier this season, albeit there was no TJ Watt playing in that game. I'm just saying, if I'm one of those 3 teams and I end up being the 2 seed, I'd much rather face Miami or New England than Pittsburgh. Because New England is as limited as can be on offense. And the Dolphins, because they may not have their number 1 or number 2 quarterback, are kind of in that same boat. Despite all the playmakers they have, we understand that. But Skylar Thompson isn't going to get the job done. I'm just telling you, watch out for the Steelers. If you're a fan of the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Bills, any of those teams could be the 2 seed. You don't want any part of the Pittsburgh Steelers. By the way, I would say top of that list, and I love this team. I think this team can absolutely get to the Super Bowl for the 2nd straight year, and that being the Bengals. The Bengals, to me, out of those 3, they, more than anybody, want to see Pittsburgh the least because there's the division rivalry familiarity there. They play this team twice a year. There's no mystery. There's no secret between these 2 teams. And Pittsburgh beat Cincinnati, albeit it was all the way back in ancient times, back in week 1, when Joe Burrow threw 4 interceptions. And then Cincinnati beat them in what was a pretty competitive game, if we're being honest, in Pittsburgh a couple months ago. But watch out for Pittsburgh. Okay, Kenny Pickett's playing well right now. He had a great QBR last night. I think let me pull this back up. I think he had like a QBR of 79. I think it was. Let me check. Kenny Pickett, where is he? There he is. 79. If you round up, 80 QBR. Now his pass rating or yards isn't going to blow you away, but he didn't turn the ball over. Obviously threw the touchdown to pass Najee Harris. Pittsburgh ran the ball down Baltimore's throats, kind of beat them at their own game. Najee had 111 yards. That Warren kid had 6 yards a carry. He had 76 yards rushing. And like I said, Pittsburgh almost had 200 yards on the ground. As for the Ravens, this is really deja vu. It is because, I always say there's two. I usually limit it to 2, but in some cases I'll throw in a third player into this argument. So I love quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are what makes football great. There's 3 quarterbacks in the NFL that get criticism, and I truly, from the bottom of my heart, do not understand it. Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, and some instances I throw Lamar Jackson into that group. Like, this guy's won MVP. He's 41-16 in his NFL career, 25 games above 500. Yeah, I think that'll work. He is the level that this dude has improved since his rookie year is remarkable. And as I predicted, when he went down, I said on the show back then, I've been saying the last few weeks, and boy, was it ever evident yesterday, that Lamar Jackson, he held out. Or not held out, but he's, for a while threatening to hold out. He wants that big contract. He wants Deshaun Watson money. He wants a fully guaranteed deal. And the Baltimore Ravens balked at it. They're like, we don't really want to do that. We want to pay you. We like you, but we don't like you that much. We don't love you in terms of what you're asking us for. And a lot of folks out there, those who for some reason don't seem to like Lamar all that much, are like, oh, he's asking for too much. And what the Ravens had was a totally fair offer. What is happening with Lamar Jackson is exactly what happened with my man Dak Prescott 2 years ago when he was in this exact same position. All the Dak haters out there, like, he don't deserve that amount of money. It's the people around him. And the Cowboys front office, we like Dak, but in the words of Stephen Jones, we want him to take a hometown discount. Yeah. Well, Dak suffered a horrible ankle injury 5 weeks into the season. How'd the Cowboys look offensively after that? You remember the Cowboys offensively? With Dak, in the 5 games, they scored 17, 40, 31, 38, and I think they had 37, although at the time Dak got hurt, they had 24 through 2.5 quarters, which is still pretty darn good. Like, they were going up and down the field. The problem with the Cowboys was, obviously, Cowboys fans will remember that their defense was probably the worst in the NFL. It was awful. It's the reason Dan Quinn is there now. But Dak was putting up numbers that we hadn't seen since Peyton Manning, Kurt Warner. And when he went down, the Cowboys offense sputtered. 10 points against the Arizona Cardinals. A field goal against what was at the time the Washington football team. 9 points against the Philadelphia Eagles. Didn't break 20 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. A few weeks later, they had 16 against the Washington football team. You understand how the story works? Think about the Baltimore Ravens this season with Lamar Jackson. Let's look at that. 24 points on a great Jets defense, 38 points on Miami, 37 points on New England, 20 against the Bills, 19 against the Bengals, 20 against the Giants, 23 against the Browns, 27 against Tampa, 27 against the Saints, only 13 against the Panthers, 27 against the Jags, and the game Lamar went down was against the Denver Broncos. Since Lamar Jackson went down, here's their point totals. 10, 16, 3, 17, 13. With Lamar Jackson, or since he entered the NFL as a starter with the Ravens. It was the week 11 of the 2018 season. The Baltimore Ravens averaged 28 points per game. That is the second highest in NFL history for a quarterback with a minimum of 50 starts. So with the Ravens, essentially, they score with the Ravens with Lamar, essentially, since he took over back in 2018, averaged 4 touchdowns a game. 10 other quarterback starts entering last time, in the game against Pittsburgh, average 18 points. One averages almost 30, one can't break 20. Lamar Jackson is getting paid by not playing. I'll tell you this, folks. If I'm Lamar Jackson, ain't no way I'm coming back this season. I'm done. My 2022 season is over. Because there's a chance next week, if the Bengals lose tonight, I'm about to predict that game. If the Bengals lose tonight, Ravens can still win the division and get a home playoff game. And at that point, they will need Lamar. If I'm Lamar, I'm like, y'all didn't pay me. You go see what life in the NFL is like without me. You'll see what it's like with Greg Roman, an offensive coordinator, with a great tight end in Mark Andrews and nothing outside of that at wide receiver. Ravens have one of the worst receiving units in the NFL, yet Lamar Jackson consistently averages 30 points a game with this Ravens squad. A Ravens team that, again, blew a double-digit lead late in the game. They're up 16 to, I think it's 13-3 at one point. Lost. Just like they blew that big lead against Tua. Like they blew that big lead against the Giants. That's what they've been doing all season long. And the Ravens are in the playoffs. Don't worry. For Ravens fans, your playoff spot is locked. Like they're in the playoffs. See what life is like in the NFL when you either have to face Trevor Lawrence, who you lost to this season with Lamar Jackson, or against, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow, again, possibly for a second straight week. See what life is like in the playoffs when you need Lamar Jackson, but you ain't got him. If there was any doubt, I'm obsessed with the word valuable when it comes to the most valuable player awards in all sports, particularly the NBA, but the NFL as well. If there was any doubt about Lamar Jackson's value to the Baltimore Ravens, I present to you last season in which he got hurt and they went 0-5 down the stretch. And now, where he's hurt and they can't score 20 points. In some cases, like the game against Cleveland, they basically, you know what the Ravens did a couple weeks ago against the Browns? They flew to Cleveland to kick a field goal. If that was the case, why didn't Justin Tucker and the special teams unit make the flight? Like, why even bring the offense? My man, Lamar Jackson's going to get paid. He going to make money. Good for him. Because he deserves every penny. Patrick Brown, Ravens couldn't get Lamar at $50 million. It would cost them $60 to $65 million once Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert get their new deals come March. Advantage Lamar. That is a great point, Patrick. And that's also what happened with Dak. Remember, at the start, Dak was asking for $35 million. And Jerry and Steve were like, oh, wait, no, absolutely not. They have to end up having to pay him $40. If they just got the deal done then, you could have got him cheaper. And then now, at this point, Dak is like on the cheap. Like Dak could be like the 11th, 12th highest paid quarterback. Could save cap space, but you didn't because you were stubborn. Same with the Ravens. And I love Steve Bisciotti. I think he's a great owner. But like Patrick said, by not paying him $50, because down the pipeline in a couple of months, 2.5 months, Burrow and Herbert are going to be eligible for extensions, and Lord knows what they're going to get. You messed up. It's just like the Yankees messed up with Aaron Judge. When are these organizations going to learn? When you have a great player and he wants a big deal, you give him the deal, because eventually, if you balk on it, if you wait, you'll have to give him more later down the road, and it will hurt your chances of putting a good team around him to go win championships. And these are good organizations doing that for the most part. The Yankees aren't as well run as they used to be, but it's still a respectable organization. Just pay Judge. Give him what he wants. No, you didn't, and you ended up having to pay him more than what he initially wanted in spring training. Same with Dak. Same with Lamar. Just pay. When an athlete's great, pay him. Like it's not that hard. These are billion-dollar organizations. They can pay these guys. He's the face of franchises. So once again, I'm thrilled for Lamar Jackson because he's going to get that money come March. If he doesn't, then I don't know what more the guy needs to do. I really don't. So recapping real quick, the rest of Week 17, the NFL, the Falcons beat the Cardinals 20-19. The only clip I saw from that game, because obviously I didn't watch it because it didn't mean anything, was that Young Hoku hit the walk-off field goal in Mercedes-Benz Stadium against the Cardinals to win that game. Lions destroyed the Bears 41-10. It's amazing that the Bears have such a remarkable talent at quarterback in Justin Fields, who, by the way, had 100 rushing yards in the first quarter. Well, Detroit's defense, that was probably their best performance of the season, given how good Chicago is running the ball with their quarterback and their running backs, guys like Herbert and Montgomery. And Detroit is now in position. Obviously, we know how explosive they are offensively. For one, I've never been the biggest Jared Goff fan, but I thought he should have been a Pro Bowler this year. Given what he was working with, it's a good receiving core. It's good, better than some playoff teams, but it's not gonna. I don't know. It's not like Buffalo's, for example. And so, like I said, hats off to the Lions, and they're in a position where if they beat Green Bay, which that'll actually be the last game of the NFL regular season, so they'll need to get some help. But if the Seahawks lose to the Rams and the Lions beat the Packers, then the Lions will be in the playoffs. So they do not control their own destiny, but to be in this position to possibly make the postseason, I hope this isn't the last time this season I do this just for entertainment's sake. But here you go, our weekly Dan Campbell, round of applause. Round of applause is a good way to put it, I guess. Here you go.
Kneecap.
Everybody got a kneecap in the Motor City against the Chicago Bears. Hats off to the Detroit Lions. Hope that's not the last time this season I do that, though. Chiefs barely skate by the Broncos. Russell Wilson probably played his best game as a Bronco. 222 yards, touchdown pick. He's good. Put up 24 points. Actually, Denver had the lead going into the fourth quarter before Patrick Mahomes, who actually completed a pass to himself in that game. He had 3 touchdown passes all in all, went up and down the field in that Denver defense, and they pulled away late. But, this is why I said I took Denver. I took Denver in the points. So Kansas City went outright because they're better. They need this game obviously more than Denver does, who, Denver, their season is over. They were mathematically eliminated like 3 weeks ago by these same Kansas City Chiefs. But it's a division rivalry. Denver's a team that got absolutely humiliated on Christmas Day on national television, especially that prideful defense giving up 51 points to Baker Mayfield. They were going to play better, and they did. They gave Kansas City problems at times. Mahomes had that red zone interception that really hurt Kansas City. But look, hats off to the Chiefs. I'm just saying, if Dak Prescott would have thrown that interception, go back and watch it, folks. Yeah, we'd still be talking about it. Or Dak Prescott's interception a cause for concern for the Cowboys? Well, it has to say about Patrick Mahomes because in that span, he's thrown 10. But anyways, Patriots beat the Dolphins 23-21. Again, I really, from the bottom of my heart, believe if Teddy Bridgewater had been able to stay healthy, I think Miami would have won. Okay. Listen, hats up to Skylar Thompson. Kid did all he could to keep the Dolphins in the game. Threw a late touchdown, but look, if Mac Jones can't beat Skylar Thompson, then I'm not sure he should be in the league. Okay. You already know what I think about Mac Jones. I think he's a backup, but if he can't beat Skylar Thompson, that's a problem. But the Patriots are in the exact same position the Packers are, though. 8-8, but if you win, you're in. You don't need any help. If you beat the Buffalo Bills, which is a pretty tall task, a team that they have struggled mightily against in their last 3 matchups. But if you beat the Buffalo Bills, you're in the postseason. I really hope that's not the case. A, because I'll be wrong, but about the Patriots missing the playoffs. But B, it'll just be unwatchable, and they'll get smoked by whoever's the 2 seed. Patrick Brown, if Lamar doesn't get a deal done, I look for him to go elsewhere and get his bag. Miami or Las Vegas are 2 teams to keep an eye on. Just food for thought going into the 2023 offseason. I think Miami would be a good pickup or a good fit because Miami is a team that seemed to have found their identity in terms of running the football. Mike McDaniel, we know he's from the Kyle Shanahan system, West Coast offense. They've got CJ Mostert. They've got Jeff Wilson, a good offensive line, and we know about their weapons that they have. To add a guy like Lamar Jackson, who's never had anything close to, not even Tyreek Hill, never anything close to Jalen Waddle since he's been in Baltimore. I'd love to see that. Add Lamar to the Dolphins. Oh, that's a Super Bowl team. 100%. That is a Super Bowl contending team. But yeah, Patriots made things really tough on Miami, who now does not control their own destiny after starting 8-2. They're on a 6-game losing streak and on the brink of missing the playoffs once again. Saints beat the Eagles. That was probably the shock of the day. 20-10. The Eagles. Can we just like, to folks out there, and I'm going to put at the top of the list because he's a phenomenal player and a great ambassador for the game, Micah Parsons. To Micah Parsons and to all of those out there who questioned, Jalen Hurts, he's a product of the system in Philadelphia. Like, they scored 10 points against the New Orleans Saints. Gardner Minshew. Listen, I said Gardner Minshew is the best backup in the NFL. Keyword, backup. Okay, I never said Gardner Minshew was a guy you can build your franchise around. I said he can win you games with this roster around him. But I said, I was adamant last week. If Jalen Hurts, God forbid, is done for the season, which doesn't look like to be the case, but if he was, you aren't going anywhere in the playoffs with Gardner Minshew, who was just terrible yesterday. Obviously, that pick 6 late to Marshawn Lattimore just telegraphed the pass. Lattimore, who's a great corner, read it the whole way and pretty much sealed the deal. Gardner Minshew yesterday had a QBR 0-100 of 11. 11 in a home game against the Saints. And so now Philadelphia, there is legitimate pressure on them going into Week 18 because they're facing the Giants. You say, well, I mean, the Giants have locked up the 6th seed. They're in the playoffs. There's nothing they can do to rise up in the standings or to fall in the standings. Yes, but when asked after the Giants win over the Colts to seal the playoff spot, Brian Daboll was asked, are you going to play your starters? Are you going to rest your starters? And he shook his head. He said, no. He said, you rest when the season's over. So, Brian Daboll, man, he's kind of old school. So, so that's going to be a challenge for Philadelphia. They're going to, if I'm going to go on a limb here, if Jalen Hurts don't play this game, Eagles are going to Tampa in the wild card round. They ain't getting that number 1 seed. Like, that number 1 seed will be up for grabs between either the Cowboys or the Niners. But a tough loss for Philadelphia. The Saints, though, despite the win, are eliminated from playoff contention because of the Buccaneers' win to clinch the South. Giants beat the Colts badly, 38-10. Jeff Saturday's Colts in the fourth quarter this season have been outscored 97-9. They are by a mile the worst fourth quarter team. I think the 2 biggest stories from this game are the Giants clinching the playoffs, and then secondly, you had the situation which was really rough with Nick Foles getting blasted back there by Kayvon Thibodeau, who's a remarkable talent. I think Kayvon Thibodeau is going to have a really good NFL career, but doing snow angels next to a guy who's like struggling just to get up off the field, like it's not a good look for Kayvon Thibodeau at all. Let's see. Patrick Brown says Josh Sweat's neck injury was eerie of Ryan Shazier's back in 2017. I didn't see the injury live. I just read about it. I saw Schefter tweeted about it. I probably picked up this game like mid-third quarter. I sure hope not, because Josh Sweat is a really good player. He had that pick 6 off Dak last week. He made a great athletic play. I sure hope that that's not the case. John Rivera from the Fan Perspective Podcast is in the comments. He says Eagles will smack Tampa Bay if they play them. Really? I don't know. I was just talking about Tampa earlier. There's that boogeyman effect with Tom Brady where I'll say this, John, what I said earlier in the show. If the Eagles beat the Buccaneers, it will be because they blew them out. I will guarantee you on this show, if the Eagles go up by up 14 or less going into the fourth quarter against Tampa, should they face the playoffs, they will lose. Especially if the game's played in Tampa where it's warm, so advantage Buccaneers as opposed to in freezing cold Philly. Like, that's advantage Buccaneers. We saw it happen with the Rams last year. We've seen it happen this year with the Rams, with the Saints, with the Cardinals, and now with yesterday against the Panthers. Are they better than Tampa? Oh, gosh, there's no question about it. But that's the guy you don't bet against is Mr. Brady. Patrick, Eagles have no choice but to play Jalen Hurts against the Giants. They know it's win and hold the number 1 seed. Lose and Dallas wins, we get the number 1 seed. And it just adds to the drama going into Week 18. I love it. John Rivera loves Saturday, but he's not coming back as coach. Yeah, that's safe to say. He should have never been the coach to begin with. I think Jeff Saturday is one of the brilliant minds in the NFL when it comes down to. I watched him on ESPN all the time this season. That's why it was so weird to have him on the sidelines. But he would do a segment every week on like NFL Live or something on ESPN where he would break down offensive linemen. I said on the show, I would hire him tomorrow to be my offensive line coach. But as my interim head coach, especially after I let go of a guy like Frank Reich, dude's going to have a job in a month, less than a month probably when the coaching searches commence in about 2 weeks. Frank Reich is a really good coach, and to not only fire him, but to replace him with Jeff Saturday, who his only coaching experience was high school. Yeah, not the best move by Jim Irsay, but it's not a move that particularly shocked me. What else we got? Browns beat the Commanders 24-10. It was certainly Deshaun Watson's best game as a Brown, throwing 3 touchdown passes. But the bigger story is Washington. They are now eliminated from playoff contention. And Carson Wentz, y'all. I mean, I've been, it's funny. It's 2023. Carving It Up started on October 21st, 2019. And the very first segment I ever did on this show was Dak Prescott is better than Carson Wentz. And at the time, that was a highly controversial opinion. Are we sure Carson Wentz is a starter in the NFL? I'm being dead serious when I say that. Because the last 2 years, when his team needed him to be great, or just to be good, last year against the Jags, if the Colts win, they're in the playoffs. Against the, at the time, 2-win Jags, who had fired their head coach, who, despite winning the game, still had the number 1 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. And Carson Wentz could not have played worse. Against the Cleveland Browns, Carson Wentz, 16 for 28, no touchdowns, not 1, not 2, but 3 interceptions, a QBR of 36, a passer rating of 31. I disagreed with the decision to bench Heineke for Wentz, and I love Ron Rivera, but the fact that, think about the Commanders' first 3 drives in the game. Interception, turnover on downs, interception. Why not go back to Heineke? Why? You're telling me Heineke can be any worse than what Wentz has put out there? It's what he does. He's bad in big games. He's a turnover machine. He's deer in headlights. He's as bad at reading the field as there is in the NFL. Just because he's big and has a massive arm doesn't mean he's good. Okay? He's better than Zach Wilson. I'm not trying to compare him to Zach, but Carson Wentz is not a starter in the NFL. He's not. Too many times we see this constantly. Multi-interception games in the biggest moments. Carson Wentz is almost what people think of Kirk Cousins. I've got a higher opinion of Kirk Cousins than most, but you tell me, listen, Kirk is not great in big games. You tell me, who do you want with game on the line or season on the line? You want Wentz, you want Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has a playoff win in his resume in New Orleans against Drew Brees and Sean Payton. He's done that. Yeah, come on, man. Carson Wentz this season has the 28th best QBR in the NFL. He played 5 games this season. I'm sorry, 6 games this season. 9 picks. 9 picks in 5 games. No. 6 games. 9 picks in 6 games. So he is. Let's stop. There's a reason the Eagles moved on. Patrick Brown, once again, Carson Wentz. He says Wentz is a backup. No further debate between him and Dak. Yes, that debate ended like 2 years ago. John Rivera, what do you think about their new mascot? It's terrifying. For those of you that has not seen the Commanders' new mascot, it is worse than it's worse than you could possibly imagine. It's bad. It is. Oh my gosh, it's awful. And Patrick Brown, apparently the mascot's name is Major Tuddy. Patrick Brown says Major Tuddy is a typical Dan Snyder move. Nothing to see here, folks. Yeah, this has just been a bad year. Commanders is the worst team name I've ever heard in my life. Look, I was in agreement with them changing the old name, but Commanders, you've got the issue with obviously the new mascot. The stadium's in horrible shape. You got the Dan Snyder controversy. It's a train wreck in Washington. It really is. Patrick Brown says that makes 3 teams who've booed Wentz. This could be the end of Ron Rivera in Washington. It could be, and I hope not. Maybe it's just because I like Ron Rivera. I think he's a really good coach. I think the players play for him. Getting to the playoffs 2 years ago while battling cancer is incredible. By the way, in the middle of a pandemic season, was quite remarkable using 4 quarterbacks that year. But it goes to show you, man, you can have the coach, you can have the defense, you can have good playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, which the Commanders do. They've got Dotson, they've got Terry McLaurin, they've got what's his name? Antonio Gibson. They've got a good O-line, good playmakers at the defensive side, but they don't have a quarterback. I think it's safe to say Washington will be in the running for quarterback, whether it's in free agency, whether it's in the draft, no doubt. John says, I think Ron will be back. I certainly hope so, because I genuinely like him. I think he's one of the better coaches and one of the better guys in the NFL among head coaches. But man, tough loss for Washington. Jags beat the Texans 31-3. I kind of saw this coming because, look, one of the Texans' 2 wins this year came against the Jaguars, and Trevor Lawrence was pretty bad in that game, so this was an opportunity to get revenge. Trevor wasn't great in this one, no touchdown passes, but listen, Texans at this point are almost playing for the number 1 pick. Jaguars looking to build momentum for that big do-or-die game, which apparently is going to be Saturday against the Tennessee Titans. Great win for the Jags. Keep that momentum building. I think this is now a 4-game winning streak, right? Let me make sure. I think it's 4-game winning streak. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 4-game winning streak for the Jags. But again, their season will come down to Saturday night at home against the Tennessee Titans. Winner wins the AFC South. But a solid win for Jacksonville to keep their momentum rolling. John Rivera says he thinks Ron will be back unless they get Harbaugh. And the reports are that Jim Harbaugh will take an NFL job if it is offered to him. And so I think Jim is a great coach. I think he's a better NFL coach than college coach, and he's been a really successful college coach. But, I mean, look at success in the NFL with 3 straight NFC 3 straight NFC championship games to start his head coaching career in the NFL. Man, that's tough to do. By the way, with a Super Bowl appearance sandwiched in there as well. Patrick Brown, Major Tutty is an homage to the 1991 Super Bowl team who had a great offensive line who were dubbed the Hogs, but it's terrifying to see in general. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I appreciate them paying tribute. And by the way, the Sean Taylor Memorial was a joke, but it's Washington. They're a poverty franchise, and they have arguably the worst owner in sports in Dan Snyder. Niners in what was kind of the game of the day, weirdly. Who'd have thought game of the day in Week 17 in the NFL would be Brock Purdy versus Jarrett Stidham? Well, they turned into Peyton Manning and Tom Brady for a day because Jarrett Stidham in his first NFL start had a QBR of 77 and a pass rating of 105 with 3 touchdown passes, nearly 400 yards. Devontae Adams. He was, I mean, he still very well might be the best receiver in the NFL. With Jarrett Stidham, with Derek Carr, with Aaron Rodgers, it don't matter. This guy still as productive as there is in the NFL, as they come in the NFL. But Niners, obviously, they missed the field goal. Robbie Gould missed the walk-off field goal in regulation, but they got the ball back off of a Jarrett Stidham interception. And sturdy Brock Purdy, he's 4-0 now. And the Niners have not lost since October. So they are rolling into the playoffs. And with an Eagles loss and a Niners win over the 4-win Cardinals, the San Francisco 49ers will be the number 1 seed in the NFC. Seahawks in the Geno Smith revenge game get revenge on the Jets. By the way, Geno's now 3-0 in revenge games. He beat the Chargers, who he was briefly with. He beat the Giants, and he beat the Jets. So hats off to Geno Smith. Great performance yesterday to keep the Seahawks in the mix. Now, the Seahawks, you're asking what their playoff chances are. Seahawks win and a Lions win, and the Seahawks are in the postseason as a 7th seed. Unfortunately for the Jets, sorry to my man John Rivera. I know he's watching. And to Alfred Parsard Jr., teammate of mine at the Grid, who I just had the show last week. Tough way to get eliminated. Mike White, who's honestly the best quarterback on the roster, played poorly, only scored 6 points. But at least now for the Jets, you're like, okay, we got the defense. We got playmakers offensively. We have just got to get a quarterback. Derek Carr is going to be available. I mean, who's to say maybe Lamar Jackson? mean, Lamar Jackson's a cold weather quarterback. He could work there possibly with with Breece Hall coming back from injury. The future is very, very bright for the Jets. They just have to solve the quarterback problem, and that is easier said than done. But at least they now know what they need to add in order to get back to what they were around 2010, which was getting to the AFC title game. And then finally, Chargers in the Battle of LA dominated the Rams 31-10. Baker was pretty bad. Herbert was pretty good. Not more needs to be said outside that. Mike Williams made a ridiculous one-handed catch in the game. Good win for the Chargers. They're now the 5 seed thanks to the Ravens loss, and they would play the Jaguars. How about that? I'd love to see it. A Herbert versus Trevor Lawrence playoff game. I am all for that. 2 of the great young players in this league. 2 guys that I loved and I said would be the best quarterbacks out of their draft. Trevor Lawrence, that one was pretty obvious. But Herbert, I said, would be the best quarterback out of his draft in 2020. I think it's safe to say at this point it's Joe Burrow, but Herbert is not like a distant second because kid is outstanding. And John Rivera is, yes, he is very sad about the Jets' season effectively coming to an end. But the Jets can knock the Dolphins out of the playoffs. So it's technically a playoff game, I guess, because you'd be knocking somebody out. But, yeah, it's a great weekend all the way around the NFL. And a week 17 that will feature one more Monday night game in the regular season. And in the postseason, once we get around to that, there'll be a Monday night game in the wild card round. So certainly excitement all the way around. Now, there's big Monday night games, and then there's massive Monday night games. This, ladies and gentlemen, would classify as a massive Monday night game. It is 2 teams, either one. There's not a single one of us that would be shocked if we saw them a month and a half from now playing in Super Bowl 57. It is the Cincinnati Bengals who are hosting the Buffalo Bills. In this matchup, Cincinnati is a home underdog. The Cincinnati Bengals, who have not lost since Halloween, they're on a 7-game winning streak, are home underdogs against the Buffalo Bills. Bills are 2.5-point favorites on the road to beat Cincinnati. So here's what I'm looking at for Buffalo. Josh Allen is playing great right now. They played a lot of frigid temperature games. They played at Chicago last week when the whole country was dealing with an Arctic blast, and so obviously Chicago was definitely no exception. They played in that flurry against the Miami Dolphins, won that game. Josh Allen, I think, is playing his best football right now. He's cleaned up the turnovers for the most part. He's been efficient. He's been great with his legs. What I'm looking at, though, for Buffalo is this. Obviously, Von Miller done for the season. They struggled at times to get pressure on the quarterback. And for a Bengals offensive line that is without Lyle Collins, who's down for the year with an ACL tear, I think it was, that could be advantage Buffalo. We understand that they can still get to the quarterback with the likes inside. Ed Oliver's really good. They do have Tre'Davious White, came back from an injury about a month ago. One of the better corners in the NFL when fully healthy. And they're going to need him tonight against Jamar Chase. And they're going to need Jordan Poyer tonight, who's playing reportedly with, I think, a torn meniscus. He's playing tonight. And by the way, the Bills, with Poyer in the lineup, have not lost since, I think, week 14 last season. I think that was the stat I saw. When Jordan Poyer is healthy in the Bills lineup, the Bills have not lost in the regular season since week 14 last year. So this is a real football team. This is a real defense. Offensively, we know what the Bills bring to the table. I still have major, major questions about their running game. As for the Bengals, at home, obviously, Joe Burrow's playing absolutely out of his mind right now. He's not turning the ball over. To me, he is still very much in the MVP race. I think it's Mahomes today, followed by Hurts, followed by Burrow. But his efficiency on third down, we talk about something that I think Burrow deserves a lot of credit for. Because early in his career, rookie year and about midway through his second year, he had a little bit of a turnover problem, a little bit of a gunslinger at times. But I think what's impressive about Joe is now he's taking the check down. If they've got Higgins bracketed, or if they've got Chase a double down the field, okay, just hit Joe Mixon or hit Samaje P right out of the backfield for a 5-yard gain, which as quick and as agile and as physical as those guys are, could be a 15-yard gain if they make guys miss. Making the smart play, taking what the defense gives you, and with the number of the playmakers the Bengals have, you should. To me, the deciding factor in this game is this. Because you've got two of the 3 best quarterbacks in the world. in Burrow and Allen. And they're going to be the story tonight. They're going to be what we're all going to be talking about. The story to me, in order for the Bills to generate a running game, Josh Allen has to be the focal point. That's not the case in Cincinnati. Joe Mixon's been playing out of his mind lately. He's been back from injury. He's looked good. Samaje Perine looked good in his absence. I think despite the Bengals' offensive line injuries, I think they win this game. Incredibly, this is an upset. This will be considered an upset. I'm going to take the Bengals to win on a game-winning drive. They're down 28-24 late in the fourth quarter. Burrow drives them down the field for a game-winning touchdown, and they win by a final score of 31-28. 31-28 Bengals on a game-winning Joe Burrow touchdown drive, and that is how Week 17 will end. I think we're in good for a good one tonight. I think this one's going to live up to the hype. I really do. But, man, I listen, Bill, no disrespect to the Bills, and as I say all the time in this show, there is no fan base in sports I respect and admire more than Bills Mafia. I cannot even tell you how much I respect those folks. So this is no ill will or anything bad towards the fan base or to the team, because I think they got a great football team that can get to the Super Bowl. But 2.5-point road favorites against Joe Burrow, who's on a 7-game winning streak, with the Bengals now getting healthy, with their defense playing the way it is. That feels like a stretch. I don't love that. So yeah, I got the Bengals. And John Rivera says definitely going to be a good game. I think it's going to be one of the better games this season. Certainly one of the bigger games this season, because if the Bengals win, then they'll be the 2 seed. The Bills will go from the 1 seed to the 3 seed. Kansas City will be the 1. If the Bills win, they'll stay at the 1 seed, and the Bengals will stay at the 3 seed and be in position to where they have to win next week to clinch the AFC North. Bengals win tonight, they lock up the North, and they're still at least in position to get the 1 seed. They'll go to 2. A lot of playoff scenarios resting on this one. And Patrick Brown says Cincinnati will be ready to play for sure. I have no doubt about that. I think both teams understand the magnitude of this game. It's going to be great in Cincinnati, Ohio. Biggest game of the season. Cannot wait to close Week 17. And this is the first game of 2021. Today's January 2nd, so there you go. Some great games in college football going on right now. You got the Rose Bowl, the Cotton Bowl concluded a few hours ago. Talked about that one briefly. USC needs to fire Alex Grinch and find a new defensive coordinator and recruit some new defensive players. But we got the national championship next week. We got the playoffs approaching. We got an amazing playoff-like game tonight, which will, of course, be an intense atmosphere in Cincinnati. This is the funnest part of the NFL season, no question about it. With that is all the time we have for today's show. I appreciate everybody stopping by as always. Be sure to catch Carving It Up Live on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. Also, be sure to like, share, comment, and take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button and hit that notification bell and get notified anytime we upload a new video. Just uploaded a Derek Carr video a few hours ago, so be sure to check that out, a YouTube short, or anytime we go live on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, and subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network. That is where I am at. You can check my show out on YouTube. You can also check out Patrick Brown of the Chaotic Sports Podcast. Ryan Flowers, Clutch Sports Talk, had a good show yesterday. You've got Barry Grant Jr. of the All Even Podcast, the Cowboys Can Fan Podcast. You've got Alfred Parsard Jr. of the Rocket Fuel Jets Podcast. So much great content out there. So many amazing creators. Be sure to go check that all out on the Grid Network. And that is also where you can listen to my show, the Grid Podcast Network, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to your podcast. A great night of NFL football ahead. Looking forward to it. Please continue to stay safe out there. Continue to take care of your mental health and your physical health. God bless you all. Peace out. Joey B. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.